please help me welcome Anu.
Thank you very much, Chen, for the nice introduction. I'm really happy to be here. I've been able to see some of the faculty members already and talk with the PhD students. It's really a great pleasure to visit this great department. I started my talk by giving a small introduction of myself and my background. What are my research areas that I'm interested in doing currently? And then I'm going to give you a brief overview of the larger research project that this talk is related to. So we've been collecting different types of data, and I'm showing you today only parts of it, small parts of it. Then I present the study that I'm currently writing with my co-author, and present some future research ideas, implications in the area of flexible work. But first of all, a few words about my background. There's this map, and these dots on the map refer to places that I'm doing collaboration or I'm affiliated currently. So the first dot is at Aalto University, Finland, which is where I work currently in the Department of Industrial Engineering and Management. And as Jen told you, there's a research unit with a few postdocs and several PhD students. And we run projects on global virtual teams, distributed work, mobile work. And my particular interests are in the global virtual teams, communication technology use, computer-mediated communication, leadership, and identification in these teams. And what is kind of specific or different in our research unit, what I like to emphasize here in the US is that we do a lot of field-based research with companies because we are mostly externally funded. So we have a lot of organizational collaboration between different companies and organizations in Finland and also globally. Another dot here points to Stanford, where I did my another visit in 2009-2010. I was there as a visiting scholar and collaborated with Department of Communication Associate Professor Jeremy Belenson. And I also collected interview data on 3D virtual environments. So that's one of the areas that I'm very interested in, and especially on how these graphical three-dimensional platforms are used for work settings, and how people present themselves via avatars, how is identity in play in those environments. And we currently have a paper on avatars and self-presentation in virtual worlds. And while I was at Stanford, we started the collaboration with Jen, and then later on Maggie and one PhD student from Finland joined us, and we are doing a research on global virtual teams that are working on product development, geographically distributed, working on technology, and we have a large corpus of email interaction that we're analyzing, studying how these groups develop group identity and how they overcome divisiveness in terms of subgroups and conflicts. And currently, I'm working at UC Santa Barbara, and this project is a collaboration with Aalto University, UCSB, and Santa Clara University. I'm going to tell you soon more about it, but my co-authors and collaborators in this project are Professor Ronald Rice, and Associate Professor Karen Myers, as well as Professor Terry Griffith from Santa Clara University. And this is the project I'm going to tell you today more about. There are several papers in progress. There are also other researchers in Finland working on this, and we're interested in flexible working, ICT use in non-work hours, and also the different types of new work environments, flexible workspaces. So that's kind of another research area that I'm currently working on and interested in. And then finally, while I'm going back from the US this spring, I'm going to start in University of Jyväskylä, Finland, as professor in the Department of Communication, which is something that I'm really looking forward to. After 9 or 10 years in the Department of Management and Industrial Engineering, it's really great to get back to work with communication people, and so I'm really looking forward to that. And hopefully I can also keep in touch and stay in collaboration with all of you here in the US and other international research projects. Okay, so today I'm going to talk to you more about this research project that is about flexible work and flexible workspaces. As I told you, we have a international and also interdisciplinary team involved in this project. So we have architects or urban planners, communication people, and management people. So the urban planners and architects come from the University of Aalto University, and the communication is obviously UC Santa Barbara, and management Santa Clara University. My background is more in communication, and I'm one of the qualitative researchers in this project. That's how I would identify myself, even though the project is very much mixed method study. So our objectives in this research project is to study different public and private places for work. So we're interested in work that happens outside the main office, where people work and when do they use different flexible schedules or different types of workplaces, and what kind of implications does it have on their work and their life. And we want to also explore these different organizational leadership and employee perspectives and practices related to flexible work in detail. So mainly the data set in this project consists of data collected from 2 international Finnish-based organizations offering flexible work programs and implementing new office spaces. So we were collecting the data while they were implementing these flexible work desks and hot desking, all these different types of new work arrangements where you don't work on your assigned desks but have like open offices, flexible office spaces. And then another part of the project was to collect data on these, what we call like third spaces, workspaces that are not at your home or not at the headquarters, but somewhere in between, like in public spaces, libraries, parks, coffee houses. So we have one coffee house that is actually specializing in providing spaces for teleworkers, and then we have some libraries in the Helsinki area, where we collected some surveys and also observations and interviews. So today I'm going to talk to you more about this one organization that is providing these flexible work arrangements to their employees, providing different types of technologies, and how people perceive these issues. We've collected both longitudinal survey data and interview data from this one organization. Today I'm showing you more about the qualitative stuff, qualitative analysis that we've done in this area with my co-author Ronald Rice. And it's a paper that it's in a finalizing phase. We've had one round of revisions in it already in one journal, and now we're submitting it once again. To begin with, why we study flexible working? What are the backgrounds and kind of the motivating factors to study this issue? There are a few reports that show that flexible working is really in common. Nearly half of working American adults engaged in at least some supplemental work at home using information and communication technologies in 2008. And then in 2014, there was another report stating that increases in job flexibility as well as telecommuting had been increased from the 2008 report, up to 67% related to the telecommuting and 45% in terms of control over time. But as you can see from these definitions and reports, flexible working is often defined very fluently, it has very broad definitions. And what we are calling as flexible work, or how we define it, we follow the definition of Hill and co-authors by saying that flexible working is the ability of workers to make choices influencing when, where, and for how long they engage in work-related tasks. Mainly in our data sets, it's about when and where, because for how long it's usually they work in the same way as traditional office workers, 40 hours per week, in approximate, like that's the deal that they usually do. But they have choices where and what time do they start their work days, what time do they end their work days. And as you all know, by using information and communication technologies, employees can adjust their personal and professional schedules and integrate places for work, family, and leisure. And that is something that is kind of a double-edged sword. Sometimes that may create challenges, and sometimes it may create benefits for the employees and their significant others. So we used in this project, we used a measure by McNamara and co-authors defining flex work with this 4-item scale. So it's really related on how often people change their starting and quitting times, how often they choose a work schedule that varies from the typical work schedule at their work site, how often they compress the work week while working longer hours on fewer days, and how often they work from an off-site location. And in our data, at least, the first option is mainly the most common one. Many people start or quit their work days or change it like several times a week. Whereas the third item is really the least used one. So most of the respondents in our data set work 5 days a week. They don't compress the work week much. But here you can see the variance of what flexible work means in this time-space continuum. And when we looked at the implications of flex work, what do we know about the results of flex work currently? It really is that there are both positive and negative results related to the implications. Negative implications are obviously the increased permeability between work and life, work-life imbalance, and stress. But there are several positive implications, especially on the organizational level. There are studies that show that flex work really reduces work-life conflicts, decreases monitoring, absenteeism, and turnover, increased peak productivity hours, commitment and motivation, and also it's a kind of a positive signal from the organization. It really helps in recruit and retention of the top workers, to provide these perks or ways to really motivate people to work in their organization. But still, these studies don't really clearly show how to develop a balance between work and life. The question still remains. Because it's influenced by so many factors, different work arrangements, ICTs, how to create this balance between work and other domains of life. And what we argue in the paper is that research could do a better job in identifying what kind of flexible work they are actually studying and what type of variables they are taking into account. And we suggest that research should study the varying levels of flex work in detail, and we take a perspective of job resources and demands to create a more clearer picture of these two opposite sides of flex work. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the job demands and resources model, but it's very much used theory and model in the organizational psychology literature, focused on well-being and different organizational outcomes. And really the strength of this model is that it categorizes these different aspects of work that can be mental, emotional, physical, to either job demands or job resources. And they can have like a direct effect. Job demands create strain for the employees, whereas job resources create motivation and improve motivation, but they can also mitigate or buffer these effects. So if there's enough job resources, that can buffer some of the negative effects of job demands. That's what the model says. But however, communication scholars have not that much applied this model, the critique here is that it's very much psychological and in a way cognitive, individual level, looking at these different psychological effects. There are a few social issues, and how they categorize the job demands and job resources is that there's like an individual, social, and organizational level in each of these factors, but they don't really look communication in the way communication scholars do. So the only interactional or social part of it is the social support that you gain from, for example, from your supervisor, supporting the flex work issues. So mainly our key concepts in this study are that we apply this demands and resources model. So we studied the psychological, social, and organizational aspects that either require efforts or skills and create costs, or help the employee to reduce and manage the job demands, achieve work goals, and help to stimulate personal learning and development. But then again, we want to study these specific communication-related aspects that are of interest related to flex work frequency, to get a better picture of what does it mean if you work more flexibly or less flexibly. Do some of these factors create demands for you, or do they give you resources? How about supervisory support for flex work? Is that always a resource, or can it be a demand? ICT use the same way, and personal work family quarter characteristics, permeability and also flexibility. And how do these concepts play a role in employees' work-life balance? So first of all, what we know about supervisory support for flex work. There's a large body of research showing that the importance of supervisory support, it is a significant, it is a great importance on reducing work-family conflict and improved employee well-being. And there are a few communication-related studies studying how the work-family issues are produced and reproduced through interaction and communication in the workplace. For example, how the supervisor talks about these people who do more flex work, or how the co-workers talk about the issues when somebody is at home and not at the office, how the discourse around these issues revolves. And also there are some studies showing that supervisors can really affect how easy it is for individuals to do and utilize flexible work arrangements. For example, in how face-to-face meetings at the workplace are scheduled, or how those who do flexible work are communicated and treated. So it clearly shows that supervisory support would be a resource for the employee, and lack of it would be a demand. That's how the most of the research is looking at supervisory support. Then again, some tensions related to ICT use. Effects of ICT use at the workplace are again mixed. There are several positive outcomes that are related to workers' ICT use, such as more flexibility at work or at home, better organizing, time saving, being accessible to others. That's what's been recently studied a lot, accessibility and how easy you are to contact with through these technologies. Some research say that it enables integration of multiple work and non-work roles, increases your autonomy and ability to accomplish tasks. And especially in telework settings, ICT use has been associated with better work-life balance, lower travel and office costs, more opportunities for disabled workers, increased job performance, and reduced sick days. So several positive outcomes that again vary from organizational level to individual level. Not very consistent in when it comes to like group level or collegial coordination of work. Then again, negative effects of ICT use in general for employees include more demands on one's time, reduced flexibility and control, kind of the opposite that the positive effects were showing. Overload, invasion of home privacy. So it's again how you frame these issues, whether it's an invasion or accessibility. So it's kind of interesting to read this literature from different points of view. pressure to always connect and respond, being excessively connected with the workplace, and fostering interruptions, greater workload, multitasking, poor work environment, and stress. So very mixed. We can't really say based on the research whether work-related ICT use would be a demand or a resource for a flexible worker. It could be either or. And actually there are only a few studies that specifically consider the ICT use of flex workers. So when we take this notion of flex work and the fact that employees who do flexible work have more agency and more freedom to choose when to use the ICTs for work, we could state that they could provide the resources of having more choice about where and when to work. And there's also research showing that control over one's work environment is an antidote to adverse work conditions such as stress. And based on this, we were interested to see whether ICT use actually is perceived as a resource when you work flexibly. And then the last concept in our study, work-family border characteristics. This is an interesting area of study, and really there's a lot of research on boundaries and borders. And boundary theory and work-family border theory are probably the most two common theories in this area that discuss the role of borders between different domains in individuals' lives. And boundary theory is much more psychological. Again, it's more about the employee's identity and which identity is salient to them, whether they see themselves as an employee or professional, or whether they see themselves as a working mother or stay-at-home mom. And boundary theory really focuses on these domains and which domain is salient for the individual under study. Whereas work-family border theory is really more communicative in the sense that it takes the stance that work-family borders are socially constructed through conversation. They are not flexible, they are not fixed or permanent in a way that, or static, but they are negotiated with your significant others, with your colleagues, with your supervisors, and they can be perceived in different ways, related to the way you communicate about your work and your life across these borders. And both of these theories look at two different concepts within the work-family boundary or border characteristics, permeability and flexibility. So boundary permeability refers to the extent to which an individual might be psychologically or behaviorally engaged in one domain, like at home, while physically located in another, like at the office. So while you are communicating with your family on today's schedules at your office, your boundaries are permeable. And boundary flexibility refers to the extent to which border may expand or contract in response to other domains' demands. So how much you are ready to flex your borders at home or at work because of the other domain requires you to do so. So a picture might clear this up. So Clara is the person behind the work-family border theory, and she explains that it's really here in between. The person is the border crosser who works across these boundaries and communicates across these boundaries, and there are different demands on each side of the boundary. And the boundaries can be more permeable, related to where the employee works or where the employee is located, and whether she or he is engaged or acts under the other domain at the same time. And the border flexibility is how flexible these borders are and how much they flex to the other side of the domain. So back to our key concepts, we really wanted to see how these four different items, flexwork frequency, supervisory support, flexwork, ICT use, and work-family border permeability, could be seen as either job demands or job resources, and what kind of a role do they play in employees' perceived work-life balance and how people discuss these issues in their work and life. So our research questions. How do infrequent and frequent flex workers vary by their perceptions of work-life balance, flex work support, ICT use, and work-family border characteristics? So we compare two different types of workers, those who work more than once a week remotely, and those who don't, who work mainly at the office. And then we were interested in how they interpret or adapt these issues, flex work frequencies and support, ICT use, and work-family border characteristics as resources or demands. How they talk about these issues and why do they see it the way they do. So our company or our research site is an international high-tech organization based in Finland in the networks and communication services industry with 1,600 employees in their national headquarters based in Helsinki. And we've collected both longitudinal survey data and interviews in that organization. We got actually an Excel sheet from their HR manager which showed us like the level of the employees, their supervisor, their unit of where they belong to, and then we tried to sample to have a lot of variance in the interviewees, and it was exactly half of the group that did more flexible work and half of that didn't, that were more traditional office workers. So in this paper and this presentation, I will show you only few very simple quantitative analysis. So independent sample t-tests between flex seldom and flex often groups, and then more focus on the thematic qualitative analysis of the interviews. So we have these two groups of respondents, both from the survey data and from the interview data, flex seldom and flex often. First of all, it was interesting, one of our main concepts, work-life balance. Respondents in either of these groups did not report or experience a lot of imbalance in their work-life relationship. This was one of the things that really seemed to work out in this organization pretty well. There were both low levels of work-to-life conflict and life-to-work conflict, and they did not significantly differ between the flex seldom and flex often workers. But what was prevalent and very visible in the accounts of both flex seldom and flex often informants was the sense of agency in balancing their work and other life. They felt that they could control whether or not they wanted to do flexible work and gain work-life balance that way. So here's an example of a flex often worker. I have agreed with my supervisor that I can work 2 days a week at home. I can decide the days based on my calendar, and that gives me the freedom of choice. For example, on Wednesdays my child has soccer practice where I need to be with him at 5 p.m. and I would need to leave from work already at 2 if I was at the office. But if I work at home, I can pick him up from school around 3:30 and still work while he is eating before we leave. So he talks about freedom of choice. She can use her calendar and decide those days based on her schedules, and that has been agreed with her supervisor. On the other hand, the flex seldom workers describe their choices of timing their work and other life in terms of agency. This person talks about her commuting time and whether she works while she commutes. I never read emails on a mobile phone while commuting. I listen to music during every commute, always. A year ago I realized that you can find all the music you want in Spotify, and that is my moment. So she clearly distincts her work and other life and takes the time for herself, not reading emails. That's a conscious, intentional decision. However, when we looked at the other factors, like supervisory support, it was clear that frequent flex workers perceived more supervisory support for flex work than did non-frequent flex workers. And it was also very, very visible in the interview data that they talked very positively about their supervisors caring for their well-being and not working too much in non-work hours. So here's again an example from a flex often worker. our supervisor says every once in a while that, hey, take a half day off now. You have had such a big project under work that now you should have time off and turn your phone off now. So more this way that they are taking care of their subordinates' well-being, which is a really good thing. And this is of course something that really raised attention with my American co-authors. Like this might be a national thing in Finland where we have a really strong policies of work and life, and that really seemed to be a perk that they offer in this organization. They provided also different types of daycare possibilities for their employees, and they had all these different kinds of sport facilities. So I think that was something that was really emphasized in this organization, and many of the supervisors were also themselves talking this way. So some of our informants were supervisors themselves, and they really emphasized, at least in the interview setting for us, that it's so important that you try to support your subordinates' work-life balance. But then again, flex-seldom workers were not as positive. It's clearly really difficult for him. I believe that he knows that we will work the needed hours, and surely he has the right as a supervisor to expect that we would be here from 9 to 5. But it is not so easy to some of us as his subordinates to adjust to that. So there were some other voices in the organization, even though it seemed that everything was so nice with work-life balance and support and all that. So there seemed to be different types of discourse going on in the organization, and framing these things differently, related to the supervisory subordinate relationships, and also the units where they worked in. Then work-related ICT use compared in flex often and flex seldom. Well, this is not very surprising, but flex often and workers used both smartphones and personal computers for work outside of regular hours significantly more than the flex seldom workers. And they also talked more often than flex seldom informants about conducting work via ICTs in non-work hours. And what was interesting was that especially the morning time seemed to be different compared to flex often and flex seldom workers. Some of the flex seldom workers also mentioned that they need to do some things in the evenings even though they don't like that, or they need to prepare something in the evenings. But the flex often workers really framed it this way, that I open my computer whenever I woke up. Like, I always work in the morning. I always use the commuting time for work. So that was definitely something that flex seldom workers and informants did not do. Usually I start by reading emails at home. I usually check them if I don't open the computer at home. I often check them from mobile phone right away in the morning, and even while driving. And the reason for that is we have a lot of meetings which you have to attend, so you need to see what you have received in the email. It was kind of a way to prepare for the workday. They saw it as a thing that they want to do to be prepared, a way of balancing their work throughout the day in a way. So they really reported that ICT use in the evenings is not something that the employer expects from them, but it's their own decision. So again, they frame it as an agency, their own decision and control when they use ICTs. And it was really a fact that the non-work time ICT use helped them in preparing for next workday. It was like a resource for them, not a demand. I do non-work hour ICT use because I know that I sleep a lot more peacefully, and I don't do things like waking up in the early hours or have sleeping disorders like some may have. But I get a peace of mind for doing things beforehand. Interestingly, I don't know if it's true or not, but at least the way they described and framed it to themselves, why they do this, it's because they get the agency and control of their work by doing this, by using the ICTs. Whereas the infrequent flex workers mentioned that they had these intentional practices to adjust the personal ICT use so that they do not work outside office hours, even though they wanted to or had the urge to do so. So they might have left their computers and laptops at work, or some of them describe how they have set their mobile phones in a way that they don't update work emails when they are in their home local network. So like reading a work email would require them to open a secure network connection, and that was too much effort that prevented them from doing that. So they had these external arrangements and practices limiting their ICT use, whereas these more flex often workers really tried to use the ICTs for their help and saw them as a resource. And then finally, work-family border characteristics. Both employees experienced slight family-to-work and work-to-family border permeability, but the frequent flex work experienced it significantly more. And when we looked at the work-family border flexibility scale, it was significantly higher than the choice midpoint, but more so for the flex often group. So both types of family border characteristics, permeability and flexibility, were higher for the flex often employees. And here's our two different descriptions of work-life borders. First of all, the flex often employee describes, I'm here at the office till 4 or 5, then I go home. We do stuff together with the family, and then in the evenings I can open the computer again. And I do at least normal 7.5, 8.5, sometimes even 10 or 11 hours a day. And I can even do so that I take a morning call if it's early in the morning. I take it from home, then I go jogging, and then I come to work. So really about this blending the whole day between work and other life. There was not many borders or boundaries between these two different domains, but they were blending throughout the day from the morning till evening. Whereas one example from the Flex Seldom group was, although working at home is efficient, it's kind of nice to come to the office so that you feel that you are working and in a way separate your leisure time. When you are at the office, it is easy to leave and then you don't have to think about work issues at all, which might tell something about his or her work itself, but still that it's possible for him to do that. So he really likes to separate leisure time from work time and not to blend them throughout the day. So what to take out of them? What would be the take home message? The current study is looking only at the organizational availability of work-life policies or flexible work arrangements, are not as conclusive as studies that compare the actual users and non-users of these policies. And that's one of the contributions of our study, that we actually look at the people who use these arrangements with varied frequencies. So our study contributes to this discussion by comparing these employees who utilize arrangements more or less frequently, and especially analyzing how they interpret or adapt these factors as either resources or demands. And especially supervisory support for flex work was seen more as a resource for those who did more frequent flex work and were in a supervisory role. So that was very, very common in the interviews. Whenever they had experience of being a supervisor in the workplace, or whether they were utilizing a lot of flex work, they talked about the importance of supervisors supporting them in doing that. And interestingly, work-related ICT use was used as a resource by frequent flex workers who seemed to take advantage of morning hours before arriving at the office. But the flex seldom workers' ICT use was presented as something that was not under their control, but they had to avoid it or try to limit it by using very concrete practices and strategies for that. And our results really support the notion of flex work discourses and contradictions, and that they are associated with individual sense of agency, like Bernadette and others have studied the same issue. How people talk about flexible work and use of ICTs is really a lot related to the agency. how much control they have in doing these decisions and selecting the times and places where they want to work. There are a few communication studies that have utilized this job demands and resources model, but our qualitative findings extend this research by showing that flex workers can improve resources both by adapting the use of ICTs on a time-space continuum. So they can really, it's not only about the communication technology features like previous studies have suggested. For example, that accessibility of communication technology is a resource, whereas like the interruptions that it makes is a demand. But it's really about the ways the ICTs are used and how people adapt to their uses and do these choices regarding the use of it. And employees who have, in general, who have agency in their work and can adjust their ICT use and work-family borders according to their need can convert sometimes something that might be demands to resources, and that leads to better work-life balance. As was the case with the employee who decided that she does not use the emails while she is commuting. She had decided that that's her own time. She has the agency and control to decide when she opens the email, and that was a way for her to balance her work and other life. However, I think we still need to look deeper and more in depth the social construction and interactional nature of these job demands and resources. For example, some of the communication-related aspects, like whether the person is a sender or receiver of a message, can be a resource for some, but a demand for others. Like these individuals that describe that they get in demands that, in a way that they write all these emails before they go to sleep. That might be a resource for them, but it might create a demand for the respondents who get these emails very late in the evening. Or on the other ways, when you decide that you don't write the email or don't take the phone call, it might create a demand for the respondent who is waiting eagerly for that phone call or email. So there's really not much research on looking at these resources and demands and ways of using these technologies in a network setting or in interpersonal setting that would look at how different choices made in work-related communication technology use and work-life borders affect on your significant others or your colleagues and supervisors at the workplace. So our findings call for more research on the interpersonal relationships between flex workers and supervisors and on the communication networks in work and home domains in which they are embedded. And I will quickly show you a picture from another study that was done already in 2004 by Sivunen and Fulk, who looked at home-based workers and their social networks. It was not an empirical study, but it relates nicely to what we would like to do in the future, to study more in depth the communication across these different domains and the networks where these flex workers belong to. For example, there was this example that a worker who is at home from during 8 to 12 might be involved in all these different networks that are belong to different domains, and there are different expectations that may create these demands on your work and life, balancing your work and life. And I also think that also the network structure and how many colleagues you work with at the office, for example, might have a relation to how much you need to be at the office or how much you need to communicate via ICTs. Like some of our informants reported that they don't see their supervisors even though they work a lot at the office because the supervisor is offsite so much. So it's not always about the location of the individual or his or her choices, but it's about the relationships and the networks where people belong to, and not only in the work domain, but also in these other domains where people might have obligations and interests to collaborate in. So our next step is to study really the communication across these borders. How does it improve the work-life balance or the perceptions of these informants when they communicate about their work domain in their home domain and vice versa. And how these relationships might support and give them more resources in their balancing their work and other life. Okay, at this point I think it's time to give the floor to you. Thank you for your attention. Any comments, questions? Yeah.
Did you do any similar kind of study like in any other country? Like this study was based on
It would be really good to do it. Yeah, I definitely agree. That's something that we discussed a lot with my co-authors who are Americans, and we really think that some of the policies Finland has, for example, for having a large public like daycare sector, like everybody can have their kids on a daycare. It's very affordable, but then you have to pick the kid up at 5 p.m. Like you can't negotiate with your other types of arrangements. So I think many of these issues definitely have intercultural and international aspects, and that would be really nice to compare. Yeah.
Sure, because it's, I mean, the whole flexible working hours thing is really, garnering a lot of attention lately.
Mm-hmm.
I'm from India, so like the organizations lately, they're really focusing on how to provide flexible working hours, especially to women.
Mm-hmm.
And like big banks now, they are offering like paid maternity leaves for a year, to women, so because they have to juggle between so many things.
Yes.
So
yes,
so
exactly.
the trend is definitely changing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one of the intercultural or international aspects of the study was that we had some informants who were working in a global role, so they had to have like call conferences in the evenings or very early in the mornings, and that was definitely one of their reasons to use these ICTs for non-work hours. But still they seem to be able to balance the other life, and often the explanation was that I have a husband who can pick the kids up, or they somehow have different ways of dealing with that. But yeah, definitely that was the issue with especially those who work with across long distances, time differences, and global roles. But mainly this organization was based on Scandinavia, so there wasn't that many time conflicts.
I have a question about what you mean by agency, because it seemed like you were maybe saying different things at different points. So, so the first question is the high flex work versus low flex work people. Was that a choice, or was that assigned to them? Was it based on their supervisor? Like, who determined whether they got to flex work?
It said in their like they had this policy related to flex work, and it said that it should be negotiated with your supervisor. So it was kind of a contract between supervisor and subordinate, but still they were discussing that not in all units you can do flex work even though you wanted to. So some of the informants said that they really wanted to do more, but still I think it was more about the choices they made themselves. Like there were much more of those informants that said that I want to keep my work and life separately. I don't want to do flex work. Mm-hmm. And those were the main portion of the flex seldom workers. But that's definitely a difference, whether that's your own choice or not. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But even the way that you defined flex work was a choice of when and where and how to do work. But it's also possible that it could be a choice not to flex work, and that those workers may have agency in even other more ways, because they're maintaining these sharp separations between home and work. So that was where I was confused, because in some places it sounded like you were saying the flex workers had more agency because they could choose, when they did work and using ICTs or not. But then it also seemed like the non-flex workers or the low flex workers, whatever, were making choices.
Yes.
And, and they, and then the related question to that is, like, did you consider unobtrusive control and how that played into it? Because I think, what people see as a choice, like, oh, I can do work at home at night and use ICTs to connect and respond to emails. Is that really a choice, or is there some unobtrusive control working where people feel like they need to be constantly attending to work demands? So how do you separate that out?
That's a good question, and I think we could answer it at least partially with our questionnaire data, because we had one item question of whether you think your organization expects you to work and use ICTs outside office hours, and that was surprisingly low. The people did not expect that that was required for them in general, but I guess there are different, it varies a lot between different positions and all that, but it's true that, and I think the agency thing is that if you have if you can make the choice, then you have different ways, different strategies to use the agency. Either you choose to work throughout the day and utilize the technology, or then you choose not to use it and create this. So in a way, that could be also an agency when you don't update your mobile phone at home. But in a way, leaving computer at home at work is to me somehow different than just choosing not to work. So it seemed that they had to have these externally motivated arrangements of not using the technology. So, but yeah, that's a good question. That needs to be discussed more or think through more. Thanks.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Just as, how was there a strategy for how you selected the quotations?
We did this thematic analysis, like really try to look across cases how they talked about these issues that we looked at, and these were one of the exemplars of that coding. But we really did a thematic line by line coding cross comparisons. I actually analyzed the data twice to merge and really to look at the codes like previously coded ones to the newer codes and emerging codes. And we also had a abductive analysis style, so we both coded the data inductively and also then deductively derived from the theory and prior research. So I think it could be described as abductive in a way.
Did you notice, sorry, I just wanted to follow up on that once I understood it better. Do you notice that there might be some actually common strategies for reasoning about the technology that cuts across both groups? In other words, they're using the same logic, but they have to apply it to different circumstance, so that there is in fact a common discourse about work and technology. I don't know if you've seen that.
I think there were definitely patterns, and like one of them was exactly this, that you saw the technology used as a resource, like I really can do this, it's under my control, and I decide that I use my morning times for this or my late evenings so that I don't stress and I'm prepared for the next day. Whereas the other strategy was clear that I leave my all the ICT related stuff at work. I don't want to see any I don't want to use my work-related technology at home at all. So at least those very clear distinctions that relate to the border characteristics, with how permeable those borders are, that was clear pattern.
Right, because there might be a sense of trying to do an identity of autonomy.
Yeah.
Right? That is being embraced and resisted in the way that they're talking.
Yeah.
So that it may be less sort of proof about the results of the survey, but it might actually be tapping into a real challenge of, like Gideon Kunda talked about in engineering culture,
yes.
Right, about how I deal with this role of my identity and this choice of work and getting in. Just curious.
That's definitely a good point, and I think there's so much more in our interview data that it might not be the best way to combine actually these two data sets. So we might even end up doing two different studies, because I couldn't show you not at least all the quotations I wanted here, and especially in the paper. So that's a very good point. Thanks. Yeah, might be good to consider. Yeah.
I'm sorry because I missed the very beginning of your talk. You probably already covered this, but was there a gender breakdown in terms of the?
Yeah. We looked at the gender differences, and there were some differences. I think the fact that life intruded work, or work suffered for life, that was more clear for males. And then there were some other, but mainly it was like almost like half and half were females and males. So it was surprisingly equal. We didn't, and it might be it's an engineering orientation, but they had like still like half and half gender roles, and so it might be that the women were also in positions that really required them to do all these use ICTs a lot, and also because of the culture, like that might be a thing here, that they still seemed that they had a work-life balance in place. So yeah, gender wasn't, we controlled it, but it wasn't, at least in the survey, it wasn't a big thing.
Did you also look at the type of work they were doing?
Not that much. We have some information about that, but not only like the supervisor, subordinate level. And there were these few differences, like subordinates focus more on the support that they need to give to their supervisors and subordinates, but not much else.
So then just something for discussion, because even before there was all these ICTs and whatnot, you could still take your work home with you. I mean, if it didn't leave your mind and you were thinking about it, even though you were engaging your family, whatever you were thinking about work, you're still bringing your work home. And so I don't know how the literature has addressed that, and rather than just thinking of a technological cause as opposed to some other just deeper, broader thing in society that's almost independent of the technology. If there's any discussion of this at all, I'm just kind of curious.
I definitely agree, and I haven't seen much of that. Yeah, I definitely agree that we blame the technology for many things that actually have been existing for a long time. A lack of face-to-face contacts is one of the things that we used to write letters like long before and make relationships via letters before we had technology. So we had mediated communication before. It's not always about the technology, but something else. Yeah, I fully agree.
Thanks.
Thank you.